I want to go one step back, on the premises, why we actually want open science. What was actually the background of advocating open science? And from my perspective, and also institutionally from my background, there are actually two big reasons. One is about the quality of science, and the other one is making science more responsive to societal challenges. Now, let me start on the first one. On the quality, you had huge problems, apparently. I mean, at that time, I think 15 years ago, a former editor of Nature told me that 60% of the articles published in Nature have data underlying it, which is not reproducible. And I was thinking, well, I learned in high school that on physics, everything is reproducible when it's science. So what they publish in Nature is apparently not science. Anyway, okay, so this is, no, but okay, this is a joke, but it indicates a huge problem. The other thing is that a lot of things are published which are irrelevant. There's a driver behind how the way science is institutionalized to produce a lot of irrelevant papers. So, okay, what does this mean? If we look then to the rewards and incentive system of researchers, which drives this system into a lack of quality and also a lack of openness and responsiveness to societal challenges. But so the diagnosis, of course, we have to open up, but also we have to collaborate more because there is a too high level of competitiveness. That was the other dimension, and competitiveness and closeness were two pillars institutionalized which are interrelated to each other. Take another side road. I think 30% of the time researchers spend, also in the Netherlands, on getting grants, which they eventually don't get. A friend of mine, he made an analysis for Australia for the year 2012. They spend for the whole year 500 persons a year, 500 years persons a year evaporated in applying for grants which they did not get. If you extrapolate this to a 7 years annual framework program from the European Commission, you get light years of work is evaporated. Now just think about it, that all this time was investigated in working together on a social relevant problem. Now there we have the diagnosis. We have a big discrepancy between individual productiveness of researchers, because all researchers, they work very hard, but the system level of science is counterproductive. Other example, last 20 years, no new antibiotics have been discovered. Why not? This has to do with reasons of closeness and competitiveness, both at the industrial and at the public service of science. So if we then go back to the drivers, to the research and assessment framework on which you in Opus have also worked. And then there are, of course, two elements which are very important. Collaboration, I saw that also, or teamwork, or whatever you want to call it, is very important, both for being responsive to societal challenges, but also for the quality of science, for the advancement of knowledge. Now, there's another element which, for one or the other reason, is completely snowed under. I mean, in my view, is actually the driver of open science, and that is that we share data and knowledge prior to publication and not post-publication. And for one or the other reason, everybody is very interested in what's happening out there in terms of publications and whether it's open or not, but not what's actually doing before we publish. And with the illustration of COVID, we have seen that you can produce a vaccine in 1 year time if you open up, if you give up the idea of originality of publications and you share your data prior to publications. But in the beginning, and we had Ebola before, but the same issue, and we were actually dependent on the moral initiative of Canadian researchers to open up the data. But it was a moral initiative. But let's reflect on this. This means that our institution of science was dependent on the moral initiative of individuals. And our point of view was, we have to change this. It should not be the moral initiative, it should be the normal driver of science. So knowledge sharing prior to publication is more important than what happens post-publication. And now we get to the situation, because we are now almost 20 years on with open science, you may have the idea we have progressed a lot because we talk about open science and that, but I think actually we regressed. And one of the reasons is that we have institutionalized, as far as my concern, against my will, the whole idea of called open access. Because this phenomenon means that you reinforce the incentive to publish as much as possible. And at the other side, you get a motivation to publish things, whether they are relevant or not for anybody, it's not important. I give an example from the biomedical field. In 2015, 6% of the journals covered biomedical research. So it was relatively overseeable. Now we have 55 mega journals, I think it's somewhere in Switzerland, producing 25% of the research output, and they publish 10,000 articles per year. This is called open access rubbish. And they make enormous amounts of money from the pockets of universities who are so stupid to follow this model. I don't understand it. I don't get it. You know, put it on your website, like the guy from the rector 20 years ago did in Liège. He said to his workers, you know, we have a repository. If you want to get promoted, you put it up there. Don't publish in Nature. So they did it all, and nobody wanted to publish in Nature anymore, and they're all happy. Okay? So it's simple to solve. So there are two elements: collaboration, knowledge sharing prior to publication. So you only need two indicators, but be aware, don't quantify them. If you quantify any other indicator, it always means gaming. You know, you can invent any indicator you want. If you quantify it, people start to game it. You get very absurd things. You know, another crazy example, I recently saw that somebody became rector at the University of Salamanca on the basis on the following. He was invited to a congress in India, and he cited himself in an abstract 200 times in the anticipation that Google Scholar would pick this up. This made him rector of the University of Salamanca. He's still there. So it's amazing what's happening there. So don't quantify anything. Just what you need to do. I will finalize this because I'm talking too long, I think, Gareth, no? So just to summarize it, this is my tendency, I'm sorry. So I will summarize it here. So what you actually only need to do is to assess the contribution of a researcher or a research team to the mission to which this individual was attached to. Be it a scientific mission, you know, you had this fantastic gravitation research where they got a Nobel Prize on it. It was published by physicists. You know, they verified Einstein's thesis. 1,000 authors were involved. It's very normal in physical science. You are not going to count a publication individually. You know, you say, okay, this guy or this girl contributed to this extent to the mission, and this is it. And the same you do for societal relevant research. If you do a mission, you say, well, you make an assessment. What is the relative contribution of this individual to this mission? And we reward the missions as such with public funded grants, right? We don't let people compete too much, you know, that they spend all their money on things which we could use for social relevant research. So in the end, it's all very simple, but we don't want to do it.